It was January 15th in Everton. A bitter winter night brought heavy snowflakes that blanketed the ground, only to be trampled into a muddy slush by pedestrians and vehicles. A blue Audi sat parked by the roadside. Bundled in a snow-white down coat and clutching a fresh bouquet of roses from the florist, Marisol Spate walked toward her car while dialing Lucian Muller's number. Today marked their 8th wedding anniversary. She finished work early, hoping to surprise her husband with a romantic candlelit dinner to celebrate surviving the 7-year itch and stepping into their 8th year of marriage. The first call went unanswered. After 2 more attempts, a cold voice finally answered. "What do you want?" Marisol's smile faltered, but she pressed on. "We agreed to have dinner outside tonight. The reservation is at." "Working. Busy." The line went dead before she could reply. Marisol stood frozen in the biting wind as she clutched her phone. The cold seeped into her bones, mirroring the hollow ache in her chest. Did Lucian even remember what day it was? Promises kept crumbling into excuses, and now he couldn't spare even one evening for her. Exhaustion washed over her. As she closed her eyes briefly, she rallied herself to call her son, Andre Muller. Earlier, she'd arranged for her mother-in-law, Elizabeth Telson, to take Andre for the day to ensure they could have a quiet dinner by themselves. Now that the plan had fallen through, she needed to pick him up from the Muller family residence. Meanwhile, in an opulent corner of the lavish restaurant sat a strikingly beautiful woman and a 7-year-old boy. The boy was engrossed in his brand-new gaming console. He was oblivious to the flashing call notification on the phone beside him. The woman next to him glanced at the screen. When she saw Mom flashing on the caller ID, her almond-shaped eyes glinted slyly. She answered the call with a quick swipe, muted it, and flipped the phone face down on the table. "Andy," she cooed sweetly, "do you like the game console I bought you?" On the other end of the line, Marisol froze when she heard the unfamiliar woman's voice. A sudden chill ran down her spine. It was Nevaeh Sorensen. She was Lucian's childhood friend and his so-called first love. Wasn't she supposed to be pursuing her doctorate abroad? Why was she back? And why was she with Andre? Inside the restaurant, Andre finally looked up from his game. He grinned as he nodded. "I love it. You're the best, Nevaeh." "Thank you." Nevaeh's red lips curved into a smile as she said, "That's surprising. Doesn't your family buy you games?" With the vast wealth of the Muller Group, Lucian could easily buy entire gaming companies, let alone a single console. Andre pouted. "It's not that. Dad and my grandparents let me play whatever I want. It's just Mom. She's always nagging me about everything. She even times my gaming and takes the console away when I play too long." "You're just way better, Nevaeh." Nevaeh ruffled his hair and gently said, "Don't say that. Your mom just worries about your eyes. She loves you. She'd be sad if she heard this." "Nah, she wouldn't." Andre went back to his game. He shrugged as he continued, "Mom's super nice. I've never even seen her mad." Nevaeh chuckled softly and then glanced at the food. After a moment, she picked up a piece of spicy buffalo wings and fed it to Andre, who was too absorbed in his game to eat. "I remember you once said your mom makes amazing spicy dishes. I love good spicy food myself." Andre happily took the bite. "Yeah. Mom's cooking is the best, even better than restaurants. Dad and I both love it. If you like it too, you should come over sometime. I'll ask her to make it for you." Nevaeh's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Oh. Really?" "Of course," Andre said, as if it were obvious. "You're Nevaeh. Dad and I both like you a lot. You can totally come over." "So. You really like me, huh, Andy?" she asked while playfully poking his soft cheek. Andre nodded while nuzzling against her finger. "I just wish Mom could be more like you. She's so annoying with all her rules." The wind howled mercilessly as snow swirled violently through the air. Marisol stood motionless in the blizzard. Her hair and eyelashes were frosted over. As the words from her phone reached her ears, her eyes gradually reddened. Of course, her spicy dishes were delicious. Knowing that both her husband and son loved fiery flavors, she'd spent her free time training with professional chefs to master spicy cuisine. She'd cook for them on weekends when she wasn't busy, and her skills rivaled those of top-tier restaurant chefs. Yet hearing Andre's words now made her chest tighten painfully. This was the son she'd cherished for 7 years. 7 years of devotion and care, only to be dismissed as annoying and nagging and inferior to Nevaeh. She wanted to hang up when suddenly a familiar yet foreign voice came through the speaker, making her frozen fingers twitch involuntarily. "Sorry, I was just handling something." It was Lucian's voice. Marisol's heart ached as a bitter laugh escaped her lips. So this was the work he'd been so busy with? On their 8th wedding anniversary, he was dining with his childhood friend and first love, and he had even brought their son along? At that moment, the call had already disconnected. Marisol laughed hysterically in the snowstorm. Her reddened eyes glistened with unshed tears. With sudden violence, she hurled the bouquet of roses to the ground and crushed the flowers beneath her heel. The heart-shaped crimson rose petals lay scattered across the snow. Their vivid fragments were scattered like splashes of blood against the white expanse. Marisol climbed into the car and allowed the blasting heater to slowly thaw her frozen limbs, feeling gradually return to her numb body as she sat motionless. Just then, memories flashed through her mind like passing clouds. She'd always known Lucian only married her because of that chaotic night, because she'd gotten pregnant and because of his mother's pressure. He never loved her. If anything, he resented her. He hated her for tearing apart his destined relationship with his first love. He despised her for what he saw as her scheming, underhanded ways. But back then, she'd been naive. The fleeting warmth of touching someone untouchable had dazzled her. She believed that if she just loved him enough, stayed quiet and obedient, things would eventually work out. And what had it gotten her? 7 years of marriage filled with retaliatory coldness. Even their son had grown distant. He was rejecting her at every turn. In this household, she might as well have been invisible, an appliance no one noticed or cared about. 7 years was long enough. The ice around Lucian's heart would never melt, no matter how long she tried. It was time to end this. The warm glow of car lights illuminated Marisol's pale, delicate features. Her elegantly straight nose was now tinged cherry red from the sudden temperature change. Flexing fingers that still felt stiff from the cold, she sent a message to an old friend from her Everton University days, who was now a divorce lawyer. They arranged to meet tomorrow to discuss divorce proceedings and asset division. The car pulled into the gated community and stopped in front of a 3-story villa with a private garden. Marisol handed the keys to the housekeeper and strode inside. The rush of warm air enveloped her and melted away the chill. Ignoring the staff, she headed straight upstairs to pack. The thought of Lucian reconnecting with Nevaeh behind her back, even involving their son, made her stomach churn with nausea. She couldn't stand another minute in this house. She didn't take much, just undergarments, a few winter outfits, and the expensive jewelry she often wore. She stuffed them all into a large suitcase. When she reached the nightstand, her fingers brushed against a secondary card tucked inside. It was linked to Lucian's account. Lucian had treated their marriage as a forced arrangement by his parents from the beginning. He had been keeping her at arm's length. He never gave her an allowance. Their son had his own card, but Marisol only ever had this one. Back when she was still blinded by love, she thought this shared card was a sign of trust. Later, she realized it was surveillance, as Lucian would be notified of every transaction. Still, Marisol rarely used it. If she did, it was only for household expenses. She relied on her own salary most of the time. She had gotten her job on her own too. Back then, she'd applied to Muller Group's tech division as she wanted to be closer to Lucian. With her PhD in computer science from Everton University, her resume showed that she was more than qualified, yet she was rejected outright. She was not even given an interview. She only found out later that it was on Lucian's orders. He had told Muller Group not to accept her. What was it that he said to her then? If you want to be Mrs. Muller, then stay home and be Mrs. Muller. Stay out of company affairs. Looking back now, every memory from the past 7 years cut deep. Had they ever really been husband and wife? Marisol left the card where it was, taking only her jewelry. She didn't have the patience to sort through the rest. After zipping the suitcase shut, she hauled it downstairs. The housekeeper, Wanda Smith, emerged from the kitchen at the sound of movement. When she saw Marisol carrying a suitcase, she was startled and hurried after her. "Mrs. Muller, what's this about?" "Business trip." Marisol brushed her off without explanation. After so many years of marriage and sharing the same bed with Lucian, she knew his temperament all too well. He was ruthless, vindictive, and unforgiving. His business tactics aside, he'd given her the silent treatment for 7 years over premarital disagreements. She wouldn't show her hand until after consulting her lawyer tomorrow. With love gone, only money remained. She'd served that father and son for 7 years. Even if asset division proved difficult, she deserved compensation for all those years under his distrust. After leaving the villa, Marisol drove to her company's vicinity. She'd already rented a fully furnished luxury apartment on the way here, so there was no point in staying long in this area. She was working in the tech department of a bank right now. Over the past 3 years, Marisol had worked her way up from an ordinary developer to a team leader in the department, though she never truly loved the profession. She initially chose computer science at Everton University because it paid well, and back then, she needed the money. An undergraduate degree was enough to earn what she required before pursuing her real passion. But later, she buried her love for art and design when she learned of Lucian's interest in computers and AI, hoping to bridge the distance between them. She stayed at Everton for her PhD, determined to create common ground. That was how she succeeded in earning her doctorate in computer science. Yet it cost her dearly. Her great-aunt, Amelia Spate, who was an internationally renowned traditional fashion designer, had cut ties with her 7 years ago. She believed Marisol was wasting her talent, and they never spoke again after the wedding. Even after all that, it brought her no closer to Lucian. The distance between them remained as vast as ever. Looking back now, she realized she must have seemed like a joke in his eyes, clinging to foolish, one-sided devotion. Now that she was divorcing him, Marisol could finally let go of computer science. She had achieved some success, yes, but it could never compare to her true passion. She only hoped it wasn't too late to return to design. Fortunately, she had never completely abandoned it over the years. First, she needed to wrap up her current projects and find a successor. Then, she could fully immerse herself in art and design again. With renewed resolve, she took a quick shower, tidied the bed just enough, and left her unpacked luggage where it was. She wasn't staying long anyway. Exhaustion weighed on her as she finally lay down to sleep. Around 10 p.m., Lucian finally returned to the Muller manor with André. The boy sat in the car while clutching the gaming console Nevaeh had given him. He was reluctant to get out. He looked up at Lucian with pleading eyes. "Dad." If he brought the console inside, Marisol would definitely confiscate it again. Lucian knew exactly what he was thinking. He tapped his fingers lightly against the steering wheel and replied coolly, "Leave it in the car. She won't go through my things." "Yay." Reassured, André cheered and stuffed the console into the glove compartment. As he climbed out of the car, he couldn't resist asking, "Dad, can I visit Nevaeh again tomorrow?" "No. We'll be busy." "Ah." Disappointed, André quickly changed tactics. "Then can you drop me off at Grandma's? It's winter break, and if I stay home, Mom's just gonna nag me about everything. It's so annoying and no fun at all." This time, Lucian agreed. Instantly cheered up, André bounded into the house. Wanda, who had been waiting in the living room, hurried forward with ginger tea to ward off the chill and took their down jackets from them. As Lucian handed over his coat, his brow furrowed slightly. "Where's Marisol?" No matter how late he returned, she would always be waiting in the living room if she was home. She would often personally take care of hanging up his coat and tidying his clothes. Hadn't she called earlier saying she was off work? Why wasn't she here? Wanda looked surprised. "Didn't Mrs. Muller tell you, sir? She's away on a business trip." "A business trip? Since when did that mediocre bank she worked for require business trips?" The thought flickered through Lucian's mind, but he dismissed it just as quickly. He had only asked out of habit, it didn't matter to him whether she was home or not. In fact, her absence was preferable. Meanwhile, André visibly relaxed. His fox-like eyes, so much like his father's, gleamed with mischief as they darted around. "Dad, can I bring the game console inside then?" he exclaimed excitedly. With Marisol gone, he wouldn't have to hide out at Elizabeth's either. He could be the king of the house now, with no one to scold or restrict him. Lucian gave a nonchalant nod, letting André do as he pleased. He then headed to the bedroom, showered, and changed into soft silk pajamas with the collar left carelessly open. His damp hair fell in loose strands over his forehead, and his sharp, fox-like eyes were slightly hazy from the steam. Just then, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He picked it up and glanced at the screen. It was a message from Nevaeh. As he typed a reply, his gaze caught something out of place, and his fingers stilled. A space on the nightstand stood empty. The red-hatted robot on it was gone. Early in the morning, Marisol woke to the shrill alarm of her phone. Her head was pounding dully. She'd probably caught a cold from standing out in the snow last night. Rubbing her throbbing temples, she pulled clothes from her suitcase when a red object accidentally tumbled out. It rolled several times across the floor before coming to a stop. It was a fist-sized robot wearing a red top hat. The pudgy iron robot looked crude and cheap. Its dull gray body contrasted sharply with the bright red hat. This had been her wedding gift, if it could even be called that. When she and Lucian married, they'd simply registered their marriage. There was no ceremony, no celebration with friends, no public announcement beyond a sterile corporate notice about the young chairman's marriage. Her identity as his wife remained unacknowledged. Only Lucian's inner circle even knew she existed. That night after getting their marriage certificate, she'd asked if he'd ever loved her. Lucian's eyes burned with hatred as he threw this ugly robot at her before walking out without a word. Later, she discovered that beneath its crude exterior, the robot contained an AI chat program. Once paired with her phone, it could voice responses to her messages. At the time, this filled her with foolish hope. Knowing Lucian's passion for computers and AI, she believed he must have built both the robot and its program himself. He made this for her with his own hands. Now, crouching on the floor, Marisol picked up the robot and opened the corresponding app on her phone. She typed the same question she'd sent on their wedding night 7 years ago: "Do you love me?" The red-hatted robot responded in the same emotionless mechanical voice as before. "No." Marisol let out a self-deprecating laugh. The answer had been clear 7 years ago, yet it took her 7 years to accept reality. Lucian did despise her to the core, didn't he? He went through the trouble of crafting this little robot and programming it just to humiliate her. He really did put in the effort. The robot now lay haphazardly on top of her suitcase with a crooked posture. Thinking about their marriage, Marisol suddenly became aware of the plain diamond ring on her right middle finger. She'd worn it so long she'd almost forgotten it was there. This wedding ring had been another of Lucian's careless choices. She remembered now that unless they were at the Muller family residence putting on a show for his mother, Lucian never wore his wedding band. This marriage had been her one-woman show from beginning to end. A cold laugh escaped her lips, intensifying the dull ache in her head. She pulled off the ring and tossed it carelessly beside the red-hatted robot. Well, these were her spoils from this marriage. When they met again to sign the divorce papers, she would return every last piece to him. Wanda was the one who woke André that morning. With his mother away, no one had read him bedtime stories or tucked him in. He'd stayed up late playing games, thrilled by his newfound freedom, and consequently slept in. "Where's Mom? I need to get ready," he mumbled. He yawned as he crawled out of bed. Wanda helped him dress, reminding him, "Mr. André, Mrs. Muller is on a business trip. I'll look after you today." Oh. The reminder snapped him fully awake, and a pang of disappointment hit him. When Marisol was home, she'd always be there the moment he opened his eyes. She would help him dress and wash up. Wanda was kind, sure, but sometimes her movements were rough, and they left him feeling uncomfortable. Noticing his expression, Wanda suggested, "Why not call your mother and ask when she'll be back, Mr. André? She'd be so happy to hear from you." André shook his head violently. No way. This was his chance for freedom. The later she returned, the better. Every day without Marisol felt like a holiday. "I'll do it myself." He pushed Wanda's hands away and clumsily dressed himself. After washing up, he dashed downstairs for breakfast. The dining room was empty. Lucian still had to work, so he had left way earlier. After eating, André lost himself in cartoons and video games, reveling in the lack of restrictions. But by mid-morning, boredom set in. He wanted to see Nevaeh. Even so, Lucian had said no to taking him to the office yesterday as they were too busy. Clutching his game console, André frowned in frustration before suddenly getting an idea. Lucian adored Nevaeh. If he got her permission first, his dad probably wouldn't refuse. As soon as he thought of it, André immediately grabbed his phone and called Nevaeh. When she agreed on the other end, he cheered and demanded Wanda help him get changed. He then summoned the chauffeur, Simon York, to take him to Lucian's office. In the conference room of Apex Union Bank, the tech team, front-end and back-end developers, UI designers, and product managers were gathered for a meeting. Are these all the requirements for the marketplace page? Final confirmation. Marisol studied the projection on the wall displaying the newly delivered specs and UI mockups. After getting confirmation from both the product and design departments, she nodded. All right, then. Front-end and back-end, divide the tasks among yourselves. Submit a detailed timeline by end of day, along with any issues you foresee. Meeting adjourned. With that, she stood and left the room first, heading straight for the CTO's office. She'd been in back-to-back meetings since arriving early that morning and only now had a moment to formally submit her resignation. Given Marisol's critical role and strong performance, the CTO, Ryan Peck, naturally tried to persuade her to stay. They went back and forth for a while, but once he understood her decision was firm, a career change, not a competitor poaching her, he reluctantly agreed. You can leave, but you'll need to find a competent successor first, someone who can take over your workload, said Ryan. Of course. With that settled, she notified HR to immediately post a job listing for a senior developer so she could begin interviews as soon as possible. Only after wrapping everything up did she finally step into the break room to mix herself a packet of cold medicine. The cold from last night had really gotten to her. After a morning full of meetings, her head throbbed violently, and she had no appetite for lunch. Only after downing a cup of cold medicine did Marisol feel slightly better. She stood motionless for a moment before finally pulling out her phone and scrolling to a contact card, her great-aunt, Amelia. Now that she was divorcing and quitting her job to return to art and design, she wanted to tell Amelia the news. But fear gripped her. Her words from years ago still rang clear in Marisol's mind. Throwing away your talent for a man, what foolishness. Don't come see me again. As far as I'm concerned, you're no longer my great-niece. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Even so, she hadn't truly abandoned her craft, she'd only divided her focus. She still knew that would never satisfy Amelia. After a long hesitation, Marisol opted against calling. Instead, she sent a text, Great Aunt Amelia, I'm coming back. Pausing, she added one more word, Moira. She even attached an image of a cloud pattern emblem below it. The moment she hit send, news alerts suddenly flooded her screen with bold headlines glaring up at her. Winthrop Graduate Business School PhD graduate, Nevaeh Sorensen of Sorensen Corp., returns home. Muller Group officially enters A sector. Muller Group announces new tech subsidiary's incoming CEO, Nevaeh Sorensen. That evening, at a quiet bar called Firefly, two beautiful women sat together in a booth bathed in dim blue lighting. The one with a chic pixie cut was just radiating fury. What the hell is Lucian Muller thinking? This is a slap in your face. Alinta Gardner practically shoved her phone at Marisol. The screen displayed those news headlines from earlier. Everyone knows Nevaeh and Lucian's history, childhood sweethearts, practically betrothed since they were kids. And now, he makes her CEO while still married to you? It's not just at Muller Group, but at the new tech subsidiary he personally backs too. He's spitting on you. He's making you a laughingstock. Her anger grew with every word. Marisol looked down and smiled faintly. Since when has this been new? Let them laugh at me. From the moment she fell for Lucian and married him, she became the joke of their social circle. Countless friends had sneered behind her back, mocking how a so-called talentless gold digger had somehow caught the unattainable moon. His cold indifference after marriage only cemented it. It was proof he didn't value her. Every encounter since had been laced with condescension. If she let every slight get to her, she'd have collapsed from rage long ago. Still, today's news stung. As his wife, she'd studied computer science, honed her skills, and eagerly applied to Muller Group. All that only to be blacklisted by Lucian's order and was met with disdain and cold dismissal. Yet Nevaeh? The moment she returned, Lucian handed her the CEO position of his new tech division on a silver platter. The double standard couldn't be more glaring. Enough about them, Marisol said, forcing a smile to soothe Alinta. Tonight's about my divorce plans. Alinta was Marisol's close friend since college. She studied law and had practiced for nearly 7 years. She had become a well-known lawyer in the country and had excellent skills. Though she didn't often handle divorce cases, Marisol thought of her first when deciding to divorce Lucian. She at least could openly discuss the messy fragments of her failed marriage with someone familiar. Alinta studied Marisol's expression before finally putting her phone away. She was relieved to see no visible distress. Fine. Then she added bitterly, let's not waste breath on that bastard. She pulled a prenuptial agreement from the stack of documents on the table and pointed to specific clauses with a frown. Her face twisted between reluctance and anger. I went through everything you sent last night. This prenup was his safeguard. If you divorce Lucian, you get nothing. Not a single cent. You walk away empty-handed. Marisol wasn't surprised. Lucian never loved or trusted her. The prenup made sure everything under Muller Group stayed with Muller Group. She wouldn't benefit from a shred of it. What about compensation? Marisol asked calmly. She never wanted to leech off Lucian's wealth. But after 7 years of contributing to that household, 7 years of thankless labor, she deserved at least that much. Tricky. First, there's the prenup. Plus, you've been employed this whole time, and Lucian made damn sure his finances stayed separate from yours. Marisol understood before Alinta finished. Still, she pressed, what if he's at fault? If there's infidelity? Alinta nodded. With solid evidence, we'd have a shot. Unfortunately, Marisol had none. At this point, walking away with nothing seemed inevitable. But she refused to stay in this marriage, not after years of neglect, betrayal, and humiliation. They spent the next few hours strategizing until finally leaving the bar around 10 p.m. The moment they stepped outside, Marisol froze. What's wrong? Alinta followed her gaze. It's Lucian's car. Marisol pointed to the black Phantom parked diagonally across the street. The familiar license plate glared back at them. She knew that car all too well. Just as they were wondering why Lucian's car was parked there, the rear door opened. Out stepped a beautiful woman in a short, peach-colored puffer jacket. The woman's chestnut waves tumbled messily around her shoulders. Her almond-shaped eyes glistened with unshed moisture, and her fair cheeks were flushed despite the winter chill. Her steps faltered slightly as she exited the car, and her unzipped jacket added to her disheveled appearance. Something was clearly off. Both women immediately recognized her. That was Nevaeh, Lucian's childhood sweetheart. Neither of them expected to run into her here. Noticing their gaze, Nevaeh looked over. She hastily covered her smudged lipstick with one hand when she saw Marisol. Then Lucian emerged from the same door. Marisol's sharp eyes caught every detail. Lucian wore only a fitted suit, and its buttons were undone. His white dress shirt hung open at the collar. It was smeared with lipstick stains. His lips appeared unnaturally red, as if stained. Moreover, his fox-like eyes narrowed with post-coital satisfaction. He looked dangerously alluring. Though their marriage lacked love, Marisol knew his tells. This was Lucian after he experienced passion. What had transpired in that car needed no explanation. Couldn't even wait to get home with his precious childhood sweetheart, huh? Meanwhile, she and Lucian hadn't been intimate in nearly a year. How long had this been going on? How thoroughly had they deceived her? Marisol's face was drained of color. Standing just inside the bar's entrance, she remained unnoticed as Lucian steadied the shaking Nevaeh. He leaned close to murmur something private. Their foreheads nearly touched. It was an intimate proximity that spoke volumes. Holy shit. These two fucking cheaters, right on the street? Have they no shame? Alinta exploded first. Seeing her best friend betrayed like this, and stumbling upon the scene, ignited her fury. She nearly charged at them as her rage burned through restraint. Marisol quickly grabbed her arm and said in a steady voice, "Don't cause a scene. I took photos." Alinta was a lawyer. A public altercation would wreck her career, and it certainly wasn't worth it for these trash humans. Besides, she already had evidence. Alinta froze momentarily before exclaiming, "You actually took pictures?" She was about to say more when she felt Marisol's grip trembling slightly against her arm. Her anger instantly softened into a mix of heartache and frustration. Across the street, Lucian, who was still standing close to Nevaeh, suddenly turned toward them. He furrowed his brow in displeasure after hearing something Nevaeh said. He was surprised to see Marisol here. Hadn't she been on a business trip? Why was she back so soon? Well, not that it mattered, but if she'd returned just to stalk and photograph him, she'd crossed a line. How pathetic. Lucian's expression darkened with disgust as he assumed this was deliberate. He rapped his knuckles once against the half-lowered driver's window and issued a cold command. "You handle this." He couldn't be bothered to approach her himself. "Yes, sir." The driver, a stern, sharp-featured young man, stepped out immediately and strode toward Marisol. Marisol refused to make a scene over this trash in public. Since she had secured photos, she pulled Alinta toward their parked car across the street. But they barely stepped out of the bar before being blocked. A stern-faced young man in a sharply tailored black suit stood before them, tall, broad-shouldered, and utterly immovable. Marisol recognized him instantly. He was Zane Burnett, Lucian's personal assistant. Raised by Muller Group since childhood, Zane had been selected in high school to serve directly under Lucian. The man was fanatically loyal and Lucian's most trusted weapon. He showed no courtesy to anyone, followed only Lucian's orders, and was as cold as they came. Marisol had always disliked him. His approach now, combined with Lucian's earlier expression, promised nothing good. Her grip tightened around her phone. "Mrs. Muller." Zane extended his hand with zero expression and said in a flat voice, "Your phone, please." Marisol didn't respond, but she also made no move to comply. She turned slightly, looking in Lucian's direction. He was still engrossed with Nevaeh as he lowered his head. The tenderness on his face was something Marisol had never seen before. She looked away, meeting Zane's gaze with icy defiance. "And if I refuse?" "Please don't make this difficult for me, Mrs. Muller." His voice remained robotic. It was detached, like a machine running its program. "And please don't make it difficult for yourself either." That was a threat, clear as day. "What the hell do you mean by this?" Alinta stepped protectively in front of Marisol. "Trying to rob someone in public? Do laws mean nothing to you?" Zane studied Alinta's face for a moment before reciting coldly, "Alinta Gardner. You've practiced law for 6 years, 5 months, and 18 days. You specialize in civil and commercial appeals, intellectual property cases, and corporate legal services. You're currently employed at Hanford Law Firm, the top-ranked firm domestically." He paused deliberately before adding, "Coincidentally, Muller Group maintains close business ties with Hanford. We're their valued client. An elite firm like Hanford surely has no shortage of replaceable talent, Ms. Gardner." Alinta's face was drained of color. The threat was clear: if she interfered, Muller Group could blacklist her from the entire legal industry. But the person being threatened was her best friend. "Ali, stay calm." Marisol took a steadying breath, forcing a reassuring smile as she squeezed Alinta's hand and nudged her toward their car. "Wait for me in the car. I'll follow suit after I handle this. Don't worry." She couldn't bear costing Alinta her career. She'd regret it for the rest of her life. Yet Alinta refused to budge. The fact that Zane dared threaten Marisol, the legitimate Mrs. Muller, right under Lucian's nose spoke volumes about his stance. This level of ruthlessness. How could she leave Marisol alone? What if words escalated to force? Just then, Zane raised his hand again. I'm afraid Miss Gardner can't leave either. Her phone also requires inspection. Marisol's suppressed fury finally exploded. What does this have to do with her? I'll speak to Lucian directly. She tried to push past Zane toward the laughing couple. Zane frowned and blocked her path by extending an arm across her shoulder blades, stopping her in her tracks without actually touching her. The pretense of courtesy was laughable. Marisol sneered and attempted to dodge, but his arm was immovable. When she shoved against him, she only succeeded in stumbling backward as a sharp pain shot through her shoulders. I warned you not to make this difficult, Mrs. Muller, Zane said with slightly furrowed brows. This is unnecessary. Alinta had reached her limit. Even if it cost her career, she wouldn't stand by while her best friend was bullied. She raised her purse, ready to swing, only for Marisol to yank her back violently. Mari, let me go. How dare they act like this? I should go bash his head in. That bastard cheats in public but can't handle being photographed. Screw this. Gritting her teeth against the pain in her shoulders, Marisol tightened her grip while sweating profusely. Calm down. Look at the intersection. Alinta froze. Her gaze darted toward the intersection. 4 or 5 black cars had appeared at the curb without warning. Their windows were rolled down to reveal stone-faced men in suits, bodyguards with an intimidating presence. Their target was obvious. Zane extended his hand again. You've always been clever, Mrs. Muller. You know what to do. Alinta stared in stunned disbelief. Aren't you two married? How could he? This was nothing like a marriage. It might as well have been a feud. She knew her friend's relationship was strained, but she never imagined it had gotten this bad. What kind of life had Marisol been living? Marisol knew there would be no peaceful resolution today. Her eyes drifted toward Lucian in the distance. While his men cornered her, his own wife, he stood there laughing with his childhood sweetheart. Their heads were bent close in intimate conversation. Anyone watching would assume they were the loving couple. And the ones threatening her were even sent by him. It was so laughable. Her heart ached as if pierced by needles. Marisol closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, her expression was calm as her lips curved into a perfect, practiced smile. However, her eyes were glacial and devoid of warmth. She met Zane's gaze. Mr. Burnett, I'll delete the photos on my phone. But Alinta didn't take any. This has nothing to do with her. That's for me to decide, Zane countered, remaining unmoved. Absolutely not. Marisol stood her ground about this. Unless you plan to beat me to death right here in front of Lucian and everyone on this street, you won't lay a finger on my friend's phone. Though it was past 10 p.m., the street, which was famous for its quiet bars and private eateries, was still lively with pedestrians. A few onlookers had already turned their heads toward the commotion. Some had even snapped photos. But those who raised their cameras were swiftly intercepted by black-suited bodyguards from the cars. Nothing from tonight would leak to the public unless things escalated beyond control. Zane fell silent. Lucian might despise Marisol, but she was still the official wife of Muller Group's chairman. Pushing her further was out of the question. Marisol pointed to the bar's surveillance camera. I told you, my friend has nothing to do with this. Check the footage yourselves if you doubt it. Zane studied the suddenly unyielding Marisol, and his eyebrows lifted slightly. After a pause, he tapped out a message on his phone. A reply came almost instantly. Zane's stern expression relaxed slightly. He made Marisol delete all the photos, including shots of Lucian and Nevaeh's intimate moments and their suspicious behavior when exiting the car. Only after thoroughly checking her gallery one last time did he finally walk away. Marisol watched as Zane returned to report from afar. Lucian didn't even glance her way before turning to escort Nevaeh into a nearby private restaurant. Midway, Nevaeh, who was clinging to Lucian's arm, suddenly looked back at Marisol. Her almond-shaped eyes glinted as one hand dabbed at her smudged lipstick. Her lips curled into a smirk. What a bunch of bastards. Alinta seethed. Marisol's face remained blank. Ignoring the provocation, she pulled up a black programming interface on her phone, input a series of commands, and summoned a hidden lock icon on the screen. A tap opened it, and green data streams flickered across the display. Back in the car, Alinta was still fuming. Seeing Marisol silently focused on her phone, she assumed her friend was upset and immediately threw her arms around her in a tight hug. Mari. It's okay. Things will get better. Marisol was both touched and amused by the sudden embrace, until a sharp pain shot through her shoulder blades, forcing a small whimper from her lips. What's wrong? What happened? Alinta pulled back in alarm. She hadn't seen Marisol cry since her marriage, so the sound instantly worried her. Marisol winced. Nothing, just. My shoulder hurts. Alinta froze, then, she suddenly remembered how Zane had blocked Marisol earlier. His arm had pressed hard against her shoulder blades. The car was warm, so Alinta tugged down Marisol's collar without hesitation. Her eyes reddened the moment she saw the skin beneath. A dark bruise had already formed over Marisol's shoulder blade. Zane was trained, so his strength was far beyond average. Though Marisol was not a weakling herself, the force he'd used to stop her had been enough to leave a brutal mark. And Marisol's fair skin made it worse. Even the lightest touch showed easily, but this? The mottled purple blue stood out grotesquely against her pale complexion. Those bastards. Absolute bastards. They don't even treat people like humans. Alinta was livid. While Marisol remained eerily calm, Alinta was already sniffling as tears dripped down her cheeks. It's fine, really. I'll just put some ointment on it and let it heal. Marisol patted her comfortingly, but when Alinta's misery didn't fade, she finally waved her phone in front of her. Look here, she said. Alinta blinked through her tears, then gasped as her eyes widened in shock and delight. But, you deleted all the photos. On the screen was exactly one of the pictures Zane had forced her to erase earlier. It showed Lucian and Nevaeh caught in an intimate moment. Marisol buttoned up her collar and smiled. Did you forget what I do for a living? Though she'd initially studied computer science for Lucian, and despite him looking down on her, she'd applied herself seriously and reached expert-level proficiency. Recovering deleted photos was child's play for someone of her skills. Alinta froze for a second before exclaiming, "Oh, right. You're absolutely amazing, babe." Carefully avoiding Marisol's injured shoulder, she buried her face in Marisol's embrace. She knew Marisol had never liked computer science. She'd only studied it for Lucian, who never appreciated the effort. Even so, Alinta had always admired her best friend tremendously. Who else could become an expert at something they disliked? That took real talent. Don't worry, Alinta declared, pounding her chest for emphasis. This evidence alone might not be enough, but I'll make sure you get a clean divorce. Even if I have to go back to school and ask my professors for help, I won't let that cheating bastard get away with this. She added fiercely, we don't want that trash anymore. There are plenty of better fish in the sea. Marisol smiled, deliberately ignoring the pinpricks of pain in her heart. With some concern, she asked, but what about Zane's threats today? Your career? Alinta waved her hand dismissively. If I can't even handle my best friend's case, I don't deserve to be a lawyer. I might as well go home and inherit the family business. Marisol knew Alinta was saying this to comfort her. Becoming a lawyer had always been Alinta's dream. Why else would a wealthy heiress endure so much hardship to climb the professional ladder on her own? This wasn't something she could casually abandon. But since Alinta had made her position so clear, refusing would seem like they weren't that close. It might even make Alinta angry. Marisol patted her head while smiling. Then I'll leave it in your hands. Anyway, I've decided to return to art and design. If all else fails, I'll hire you as my personal lawyer at a premium salary. Alinta's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. You've finally come to your senses. After all, Marisol's artistic design skills were absolutely top tier. She had reached expert level even in computer science, which she claimed wasn't her natural talent. Her design skills were even more extraordinary as she'd been recognized as a prodigy in her early teens. She'd been training under an internationally famous master of traditional fashion design. Her mentor happened to be one of the 13 founding members of the world's premier haute couture brands, with extensive resources and deep connections. Unfortunately, due to family circumstances and her subsequent decision to switch to computer science for Lucian after marriage, she had wasted many precious years. Given Marisol's natural gift, she'd hit the ground running with unlimited potential if she returned to design now. Both of them had work the next day, so after chatting a while longer, they went their separate ways home. Marisol had just returned to her flat near the company when her phone suddenly vibrated. She wondered who would be messaging at this hour. Opening it curiously, she froze in surprise. It was a message from Amelia. She hadn't dared call directly earlier and hadn't held much hope when sending that text. Yet her great-aunt replied the same day. She quickly opened the message that read, "I'm abroad for the famous Gilmore Fashion Week, then heading to Airedale for Haute Couture Week. We'll discuss your issue when I return at month's end. Bring me your latest portfolio." After 7 years apart, Amelia remained as brisk and businesslike as ever. But the fact she responded at all meant there was hope for reconciliation between them. Some of the tension Marisol had carried all evening finally eased. At least one good thing happened today. With about 2 weeks until the month's end, she needed to prepare thoroughly while wrapping up her current work. Amelia had always been strictly professional, as she was someone who judged by skill alone, never by familial ties. Distracted by these thoughts, Marisol showered, applied medicine to her shoulder, and went to bed. Just before falling asleep, she felt she'd forgotten something important, but exhaustion overwhelmed her before she could recall what it was. Back at the Muller Manor, also known as the Crimson Oaks estate, the household staff had already gone to bed, leaving Andre alone in his room to stay up late playing games. By early morning, he had grown bored and frustrated. He didn't want to call his mother, as she would always say the same things. She would be nagging and lecturing until it drove him crazy. But being home alone was so boring. Nevaeh was the only one who really knew how to have fun with him. His mother was so dull. That afternoon at his father's office, he'd barely gotten to spend time with Nevaeh before his father had Simon bring him home, saying they had important business but promising to return tonight. What liars! Andre clutched his phone and called Lucian. After several rings, the call finally connected. Andre complained immediately, "Dad, when are you coming home?" Lucian's voice remained calm. "Didn't your mother return from her business trip? Have her stay with you for now." "She's not here." Andre's voice grew more petulant. "Dad, you're such a liar." Lucian sounded surprised. "Your mother didn't come home? Hadn't her business trip ended? She'd even been following and photographing him earlier today. How could she not have returned home? Was she throwing a tantrum because of what had happened tonight? But shouldn't she be punished for stalking him and taking those photos anyway?" Lucian found Marisol completely unreasonable. She'd always come crawling back eventually, as she always did. He dismissed the matter from his mind. "No," Andre shouted angrily. "And I don't want Mom anyway. She's so annoying. Dad, just come home." Andre was fuming now when suddenly, Nevaeh's voice came through the phone. "Lucian, who is it?" Andre's eyes lit up the moment he heard Nevaeh's voice. "Nevaeh! Nevaeh!" he shouted excitedly, then huffed in annoyance. "Dad, you liar. You promised me but didn't keep your word. I'm not talking to you anymore. Nevaeh, Dad lied to me." By the end, he was practically tattling to Nevaeh. On the other end, Nevaeh took the phone and gently soothed Andre. She playfully scolded Lucian a little before promising to take Andre out on the weekend and play games with him. Only then did Andre finally cheer up. Nevaeh always knew how to handle him. In the past, whenever Lucian scolded him or upset him, going to Marisol never helped. His dad never listened to her anyway. After a while, Andre reluctantly hung up. But as soon as the call ended, he suddenly remembered what Lucian had just said. His mom was supposedly back from her business trip. Did that mean she was coming home tonight? No way. If she came back, she'd start nagging him again and restricting his gaming time. That woman was annoying. Even his dad didn't like being around his mom, so why should he have to put up with her? Lucian was so mean. There was just no way he was going to obey. He should go to his grandma's house instead. That way, even if Marisol came back, he wouldn't have to stay with her. Andre immediately scrambled out of bed. He clumsily pulled on his clothes, grabbed his gaming console, and stomped downstairs to bang on Wanda's door. Groggy from being woken up, Wanda had no idea what the spoiled young heir was throwing a tantrum about this time. Suppressing her exhaustion, she called for Simon. They then accompanied him to the Muller family residence in the middle of the night. Marisol remained unaware of the late-night drama at the Crimson Oaks estate. Even if she had known, it wouldn't have affected her anymore. Year after year of disappointment had nearly filled her quota. After all, she'd already decided on divorce. She even gave up custody rights. The next morning, Marisol woke early out of habit. She began by watching the latest Fashion Week videos on her computer. Then, she grabbed breakfast near her office building on the way to work. As she no longer needed to prepare nutritious breakfasts for her husband and son, and as she was living temporarily in this apartment, she'd been eating out recently. The extra time allowed her to focus more on her own affairs. Her entire day was spent interviewing new hires while organizing work materials and tasks for the impending handover. Still, she left the office right on time. With Amelia returning at the month's end, Marisol needed to prepare her portfolio and recent fashion designs beforehand. This was her true focus now, and time was running short. Between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m., right in the heart of Everton's rush hour, Marisol drove for over 2 hours before reaching a somewhat desolate villa community called Verdant Woods in the suburban outskirts. Passing through a tree-lined avenue, she parked before a 2-story villa with Moira engraved on the nameplate beside the door. This was the villa she'd purchased with her savings from years of salary and private custom designs for high-society clients. It was currently her personal studio. Though she'd prioritized family and pursued computer science in recent years, Marisol had never truly abandoned artistic design. Lucian had always despised her public presence. His refusal to let her join Muller Group stemmed not just from dislike but from wanting to confine her to domestic life as nothing more than a decorative Mrs. Muller. Even so, Marisol wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She chose instead to pursue computer science, which Lucian favored. She spent 7 years meticulously caring for and trying to please him. Even after all that, she still failed to reach his heart. Now, she faced the prospect of losing everything in the divorce. It was fortunate she had her own convictions. Since Lucian disliked her public presence, she secretly worked under the name Moira, taking private commissions through connections from close friends. Her exclusive service offered complete discretion, impeccable reputation, and designs that blended unique luxury with classical mystique. What truly set her apart was her mastery of rare, intangible cultural heritage hand embroidery techniques, which was a dying art in modern times. Over the years, she built considerable prestige among elite clientele. However, having limited time meant she couldn't participate in major international showcases. Currently, her private custom pieces commanded prices ranging from hundreds of thousands of dollars, with only a few exceptional works breaking the $1 million mark. But now, with her focus fully returning to artistic design, her career would undoubtedly accelerate. The villa door unlocked to reveal a spacious, high-ceilinged foyer. The walls were covered with oil paintings and ink-wash pieces, mostly portraits, alongside numerous half-finished garment sketches pinned haphazardly between them. The floor was crammed with clothing racks draped with fabrics, partially completed outfits, dress forms, and various other design materials scattered about. With the entire weekend ahead, she could devote herself completely to this space. The second floor housed finished pieces, valuables, and portfolio collections. Marisol headed upstairs without a second thought. Pushing open a door, she froze at the sight of cloth-draped mannequins. This outfit. She lifted the dust cover to reveal a sleek black evening suit with intricate embroidery. The cuffs featured her signature motif, clouds embroidered in gold and silver thread using a rare double-faced stitching technique that created different patterns on each side. It was the distinctive hallmark of Moira's studio. But what commanded attention was the silver-threaded phoenix with wings spread across the shoulders. Its beak clutched a brilliant ruby positioned precisely over the heart, the gem catching the light with every subtle movement. The effect was breathtaking, an understated elegance that whispered luxury rather than shouted it. The sight of this suit pierced Marisol's heart like a thorn. She had made it for Lucian, staying up late after work to sketch the designs, carefully selecting and cutting each piece of fabric, and stitching every embroidery thread by hand. That rare ruby had come from a specialty gem dealer. The entire process took over 3 months. She had planned to gift it to him on their 8th wedding anniversary. Instead, she received betrayal from both her husband and son. Now, staring at the suit and remembering how she'd been publicly humiliated the previous night, Marisol suddenly wanted to tear it to shreds. She picked up a pair of scissors. But just as she was about to cut into the fabric, she hesitated. She knew this suit would never reach Lucian. She didn't even want to give it to him anymore. Yet she couldn't bring herself to destroy it, not when it held months of her heart and labor. In the end, Marisol left the suit untouched, draping the cloth back over it. She'd just find a way to deal with it later. A private custom piece like this was meant to be one of a kind, tailored specifically to one person's measurements, never to be replicated. But finding a new buyer wouldn't be hard, not when the designer's name carried weight. It was nightfall at Crimson Oaks estate. Lucian finished work and drove home, only to find Marisol wasn't waiting to greet him as usual. He casually asked Wanda, "Where's Mrs. Muller?" Wanda, who was confused by the question, replied, "Sir, didn't Mrs. Muller leave on a business trip days ago? She hasn't returned." A business trip? Hadn't she already come back? He'd seen her just last night. But he didn't dwell on it. After all, Marisol had nowhere else to go. He remembered how she'd severed ties with her family before their marriage. She'd never reached out to them all these years. Plus, she only knew a handful of friends in Everton and had no real connections. She couldn't possibly be anywhere else. This was the only home she could return to. Where else would she go? Then, after learning that André was at the Muller family residence, Lucian left again. He'd only come back to pick up André as he'd promised to take him out with Nevaeh over the weekend. Back at Moira's studio, Marisol moved to another room and switched on the lights. There, displayed on a mannequin, was a deep purple men's evening suit embroidered with Baroque-style needlework, a private commission for an elite client. The client remained shrouded in mystery. Despite the custom order, Marisol had never met them in person. They'd only sent an agent with precise body measurements, which suggested an exceptionally well-proportioned physique, along with detailed style preferences. Had it not been for a trusted friend's personal recommendation, Marisol would have hesitated to accept the commission initially. But the offer proved impossible to refuse. The client paid a $1 million deposit alone, making this her most significant commission to date. It was a breakthrough for her career. The suit needed only final touches and quality checks before delivery in a few days. Marisol planned to dedicate the coming days exclusively to perfecting every detail. Hence, she stayed at the studio that night. The next day, Marisol spent hours at the studio, putting finishing touches on the suit and organizing her portfolio from recent years. Time slipped away unnoticed. Only when Alinta called that evening to insist on dinner did she realize how hungry she was. Even standing up too quickly left her dizzy. Popping a candy she always carried, Marisol drove to the private restaurant Alinta had booked. But as she parked and prepared to get out, she froze. A familiar car was parked diagonally ahead of hers. Within moments, she watched Nevaeh and Lucian step out. Before she could process the coincidence, her son André tumbled out after them, bouncing excitedly into Nevaeh's arms with unmistakable affection. The sight lodged like a fishbone in Marisol's throat. Her heart might as well have been crushed under a boulder. Seeing it firsthand was entirely different from hearing about it. Fighting nausea, she rolled her window down a fraction with trembling fingers. André's childish voice immediately flooded the car. "Nevaeh, why won't you answer me? You're back in the country now, so why can't I live with you? I want to be with you all the time. I miss you so much every day." Nevaeh patted his head. Her almond-shaped eyes were brimming with warmth. "That day will come, Andy. Be patient." "Really?" André's face lit up. Nevaeh glanced at Lucian. When he didn't object, she smiled. "Of course." Just then, a group of strikingly handsome young men approached, calling out to Lucian and Nevaeh. "Lucian! Nevaeh! We've been waiting forever. Come on. Lucian specially gathered us tonight to celebrate Nevaeh's triumphant return to the homeland. Time to conquer new heights." Marisol recognized the men. They were Lucian's childhood friends, all from the same elite circle. Actually, they were Nevaeh's childhood friends too. They all belonged to the same tight-knit group, having grown up playing together. Lucian's and Nevaeh's families had always been close, and the elders had unofficially betrothed them since childhood. Though the pair never officially dated as adults, everyone assumed they'd eventually end up together, given enough time. But no one anticipated that an outsider would swoop in, how the unattainable Lucian would be claimed by some unknown young woman. That young woman was Marisol. Back then, Nevaeh had been studying abroad. When she heard about Lucian's whirlwind marriage to Marisol, she didn't return to the country for years. As for Lucian and Nevaeh's mutual friends, they all despised Marisol. They deemed her unworthy. They were convinced she'd used underhanded tactics to trap Lucian. How dare someone like her humiliate Nevaeh? Over the years, they'd made Marisol's life miserable with constant pranks and endless sabotage. Lucian never introduced her to his friends, either. No matter how hard she tried, she could never break into his inner circle. So, after enough humiliation, she'd given up. From beginning to end, she remained an outsider. Marisol smiled bitterly as she watched the cheerful reunion from afar. She was struck by the absurdity of it. 7 years of effort couldn't compete with Nevaeh's mere return. Everything she'd ever longed for, Nevaeh could obtain with a mere gesture. Even the son she'd carried for 10 months adored Nevaeh more. Her marriage was a joke and a spectacular failure. Marisol remained frozen long after the group entered the private restaurant and disappeared from view. Only when Alinta called again did she realize she was drenched in cold sweat. "I'm here already. Coming up now." Marisol replied calmly after steadying her breathing. She exited the car with perfect composure and headed to the third-floor private dining room Alinta had reserved. The moment she entered, she noticed Alinta's stormy expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. Alinta clicked her tongue. "Just our luck, running into those trashy people here. Don't they have it anywhere else to go?" Marisol paused. Upon further questioning, she learned Lucian's group had booked a private room on the same floor. It was directly across from theirs. She could only sigh in resignation. Studying her reaction, Alinta tentatively suggested, "Should we move somewhere else?" Marisol shook her head. "Why should we?" Alinta immediately slammed the table, reinvigorated. "Damn right. They're the ones who should be ashamed, not us." Once their food arrived, Alinta finally broached the main topic. "About the divorce, I consulted my professor who specializes in family law. We drafted a customized agreement for your situation. It's basically ready. You can file in a few days, and let's start with private negotiation. If mediation fails, we sue." Marisol blinked, then nodded silently. Alinta continued, "Also, the holiday season's wrapping up soon. What are your plans?" Alinta slowed her eating pace at this question. She knew all about Marisol's family situation. Those blood-sucking parents of hers had nearly sold Marisol out years ago. She only managed to escape after forking out enough money to buy them a villa in Portsbridge. They'd barely been in contact since, effectively estranged. Now, with the divorce, Marisol certainly couldn't return to that so-called family home. Seeing Marisol keep her head down while eating, Alinta sighed inwardly before offering, "How about coming to my place for a proper celebration, like we did in college? Mom's been nagging me lately about how much she misses you and asking when you'll visit again. Honestly, she treats you more like her real daughter than me." Marisol couldn't help but laugh. Warmth flooded her chest. She realized that if everything went smoothly, the divorce proceedings would be finalized before the season ended. That meant she wouldn't have to spend another day at the Muller family residence. In any case, there likely wouldn't be any complications. Given how openly Lucian adored Nevaeh, he would undoubtedly jump at the chance to divorce if she initiated it. Marisol and Alinta finished their meal, chatted for a while, and then left. As they exited, muffled laughter still drifted from the private room across the hall, Andre's childish giggles being the most distinct of all. Alinta shot a cautious glance at Marisol. Only when she saw that her friend's expression remained unreadable did she relax slightly, though her worry didn't lessen one bit. This wasn't just a failing marriage. She'd witnessed firsthand how clingy Marisol's own son was with Nevaeh when the group arrived earlier. They were disgustingly affectionate. It was no wonder Marisol had given up custody so readily when discussing the divorce. Alinta hadn't pressed at the time, but she'd had her suspicions. For the first few years of Marisol's marriage, she'd often brought Andre along for visits. They'd even talked about Alinta becoming his godmother. Then, over the past year or so, Marisol suddenly stopped bringing him along. Whenever asked, she would claim he was busy with studies. Now, though, Alinta understood. The boy had likely already drifted from his mother by then. However, if Marisol didn't want to talk about it, Alinta wouldn't pry. Some wounds were too raw to touch. Truthfully, Alinta had never approved of Marisol's marriage to Lucian. Before or after the wedding, he'd never once bothered to enter Marisol's social circle and was indifferent to everyone she cared about. Hell, Alinta made a point of introducing every boyfriend to her closest friends over meals. Yet Lucian had outright refused to engage with Marisol's world. 7 years of marriage. 7 years as Marisol's best friend in Everton. And not once had Alinta met Lucian in private. This much she understood, as marriage was a private matter. What's more, he was the current head of Muller Group, a campus legend in his student days who had forced his own father out of power within 7 years of taking over the company. His ruthless reputation was well-earned, and now he was aggressively pushing into AI development with characteristically cutthroat efficiency. Back in their university days, Alinta had been stunned when her best friend had somehow managed to win over this notoriously untouchable, merciless ice prince. She hadn't approved then, but assumed that the young heir simply looked down on their small social circle. All was fine as long as he treated Marisol well. But reality proved otherwise. Now just a wall away, Marisol remained completely excluded from Lucian's world. Remembering the public humiliation days earlier and then picturing the people in that private room, including her best friend's own son, made Alinta's head pound. What kind of nightmare was this? The two parted ways downstairs. Only after Alinta repeatedly nagged her to eat properly did Marisol return to Moira's studio. She worked until dawn and simply slept there. Meanwhile, the Crimson Oaks estate stood dark and empty. Lucian and Andre never returned that night. The next morning, Marisol had barely started working when HR called. They'd found several senior developers willing to interview on weekends and asked if she wanted to come in and meet them. Marisol agreed. She wanted to find a successor quickly so she could focus on her art and design work sooner. After reviewing the resumes sent over, she only accepted one candidate who lived relatively close to the studio. She asked the HR department to schedule an afternoon interview at a nearby cafe, making it convenient for her to attend and grab a meal there too. The studio's remote location made finding decent meals difficult. At noon, Marisol headed over. She arrived early at the designated cafe to wait and have lunch. Unexpectedly, the candidate was already there. It was a clean-cut young man who seemed eager. They exchanged greetings before sitting across from each other. Marisol started by asking his coffee preference. After ordering, she got straight to business. Let's begin with your self-introduction. She picked up his resume from the table and began skimming it. When no response came after a while, she looked up in confusion to find him staring at her blankly. Is something wrong? Was there something on her face? The young man's face flushed bright red. Sorry, I didn't expect my potential team lead to be so beautiful, he stammered awkwardly. He'd been completely mesmerized. Marisol chuckled. Sweet talk won't substitute for technical skills. I know. His ears were burning crimson now. The young man quickly regained his composure and delivered a concise 3-minute self-introduction. William Quinley, that's a good name, said Marisol. The earlier awkwardness actually helped lighten the mood. After this casual compliment, Marisol proceeded to question him thoroughly about the technical aspects of his resume, the company's current tech stack, and management challenges. He answered fluently and even offered some constructive suggestions. Just as she was about to wrap up with some final questions, she caught a familiar figure outside the window in her peripheral vision. Looking up, she froze in surprise. She saw Lucian, Nevaeh, and Andre standing not far outside, looking in their direction. When William noticed Marisol staring silently out the window, he followed her gaze and was stunned all over again. What a gorgeous family! Seeing the handsome man, beautiful woman, and equally lovely little boy together, he naturally assumed they were related. Noticing their intense focus on their table, he asked curiously, "Miss Spate, do you know them?" That was putting it lightly. Just as Marisol tore her eyes away to steer the conversation back to the interview, the cafe door swung open. Andre dashed straight to her while shouting excitedly, "Mom!" He hadn't missed her when they were apart, but the moment he saw her, a pang of longing hit him. Plus, guilt gnawed at him after avoiding her for days, so he bolted over the second he spotted her. William was floored. Marisol looked so young and stunning, so he didn't expect her to have a kid. Then came the crushing embarrassment. He'd mistaken the boy for someone else's child, and she hadn't corrected him. Not to mention. His gaze drifted to Lucian and Nevaeh, who had followed Andre inside. His confusion deepened. Were they Marisol's friends? But the intimidating man bore an uncanny resemblance to the boy, especially those fox-like eyes that looked sharp and mocking. It was as if they could see right through him. They made William's scalp prickle and his blood run cold. He quickly averted his gaze. Lucian glanced at William, then closed the distance with a few effortless strides. "Working?" he asked Marisol lightly, reaching for the resume on the table. Marisol ignored him. Freeing her hand from Andre's grip, she snatched the documents first. Lucian's fingers closed on empty air. He paused, seemingly unfazed, and retracted his hand with an easy smile. Nevaeh, who had been following behind, stepped closer to stand beside Lucian. She extended her hand toward Marisol with a bright smile. "Mari, long time no see."